Thank you to Eagle Harbor and to Carol for setting this up, and to Victoria for helping set this up. I'm just delighted to be here. I used to live on Bainbridge, so this is really special to be back. And I'll be reading today from a book called The Robot Scientist's Daughter, which is all about growing up in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is also called America's Secret City and the Atomic City, because it's where they built the first atomic bomb, along with Hanford. Washington was the other place they built that. So here's the cover. It's very exciting. Anyway, I have to read from gigantic print because I'm partially blind. All right. Anyway, so I will start the reading. I'm going to start out with some scientific poems and then kind of do some more personal poems, so hope that works. The first poem is called Cesium Burns Blue. Can you guys hear me in the back?
Yes, no, it's good.
Cesium burns blue. Copper burns green. Sodium yellow. Strontium red. Watch the flaming lights that blaze across your skies, America. There are burning satellites even now being swallowed by your horizon, the detritus of space programs long defunct, the hollowed masterpieces of dead scientists. Someone is lying on a grassy hill, counting shooting stars, wondering what happens when they hit the ground. In my backyard at Oak Ridge, they lit cesium to measure the glow. Hold it in your hand. Foxfire, wormwood, glowworm. Cesium lights the rain, absorbed in the skin, unstable, unstable, dancing away, ticking away in bones, fingernails, brain. Sick, burns through, burns blue. So that is a very cheerful poem. But it kind of goes to this next one. So early on in Tennessee, I was the kind of kid who ate everything in the yard. I don't know if any of your kids did that. So this poem is about learning to tell what's safe to eat. Lessons in Poison, Oak Ridge, Tennessee. She learned early to tell poison plants because she liked to eat things in the yard. Wild onion, grasses, green apples. To tell the fronds of Queen Anne's lace from wild carrot. The snakeberry from strawberry. Sassafras from poison oak. That the prettiest mushrooms were the most toxic. That lily of the valley and foxglove, though dainty, were deadly. But she didn't learn then. The frog, the mud dauber wasp nest, the milk from cows, the white-tailed deer, the catfish, were full of hot particles. So her father brought out the Geiger counter to measure her snowmen, to teach her the snow, too, wasn't safe to taste. So that is that. So that's true. The snow in Oak Ridge was full of there was a building called Building K, and it kept a lot of the nuclear material and had a smoke come out of it. It was like a mix of all kinds of fun things you probably did not want in your rainwater. But that's why kids in Oak Ridge growing up, we weren't allowed to eat the snow. So I put that up on Facebook, and people were like, "Oh yeah, my dad told me I couldn't eat the snow, but he never told me why." I was like, "Oh yeah, that was probably good advice. Don't do that." And I don't know how many of you guys remember the Foxfire books. Did any of your grandparents keep you the Foxfire books? So our grandparents were continually sending us Foxfire books back when I was a kid. So this is called the Foxfire books. In case of emergency, learn to make glass. I remember burying acorns in the ground. Nuclear bombs built next door hovered over us like sinister black hives. It seemed natural that every day might be my last. Nevertheless, there were violets to pick from the moss by the oaks. There were dogs and horses to stretch out next to, strawberries to be gathered and smothered with sugar. Every long sunbeam had its own message from God, I was sure, hiding amid the dust motes. I learned the names of crawling creatures trapped, petrified in limestone rocks. I crawled inside abandoned bear caves for shelter. I tried to quiet the feet on the forest floor. In case of poisoning, eat this. In case of war, hide underground. I learned to purify water, named edible leaves, in case, in case, in case. It seemed as if the trees themselves were letting in the light for me, as if I might be able to lead people to safety. I remember folding white sheets next to a Geiger counter. Oil reserves burning up, it was the 70s. My grandparents sent books of Appalachian rituals, sassafras tea, planting peas by the moon, sowing up the land. It seemed natural then. Our woods would grow glowing mushrooms, that it was the fire of foxes, and we believed then it could be appeased. So that's that poem. So for this book, I sort of created a character called the Robot Scientist Daughter, which is sort of a composite of sci-fi characters and pop culture representations of evil scientists and their daughters. So this one is called The Robot Scientist Daughter, Medical Wonder. The Robot Scientist Daughter was a bit confused. She started down a road to medical wonder, sat under the machine's light, but tiptoed off on a paper trail, looking for an island of cranes. She made 1,000 wishes. Still, she shed a blue glow, and everyone said, how sickly. Her nails made of plastic and paper mache, her heart's thump-thump 3 times fast, her one kidney curled inside her ribs, her blood trying to escape. Father, she screamed, but he couldn't save her. The robot scientist daughter knew what she had to do. With her own 2 hands, she built a new body, one that worked better this time, shiny and smooth as mirrored glass. After all, she'd been trained. It was no less than was expected. She crawled inside and adjusted the fit. This time, there will be no stopping her. The curves were all impenetrable, and the precision of each drum kit beat keeps her in line. She's a soldier, a savior, a ship to bear prisoners into space. So I don't know if I thank you guys for coming out on a super rainy day. Thank you. We got here on we got at 12, we got on the 1 o'clock ferry, it was still driving in. I was like, maybe it'll let up by the time. So the next poem was actually inspired by a 1969 Time article I read about, and Time in 69 wasn't super scared of radiation. So this journalist was like, wow, it's so neat. They found out that all these wasp nests were radioactive because of the mud from a ridge, and there was a whole house full of them, and it was just, ticking off the clock, and we were taking pictures of it, and I'm like, what an interesting tone. So this is called, but apparently, so all these wild animals, they get on the grounds of Oak Ridge and they carry that stuff away. That's the problem. You can't contain it. Same problem in Hanford. They have the little radioactive budding problem. So this is like that. Hot wasp nest. Slick with mud, their buzz punctuated afternoons spent building nests that poisoned their young, filling abandoned houses with the tick-tick of radioactive dirt. Poor wings, poor feet, unequipped but ambitious. You didn't know the decimeter containment procedure, only the horror of transfer of architecture. Swallows, too, daubing the mud on desks, surely too fragile to protect the chicks inside their eggs. The scientists were following you as well, to watch the spread of radionuclides, project the radius of your flight. Oh frog, oh catfish, oh white-tailed deer, oh invertebrate, oh poisoned deers. Burn off, carry away, burrow underground. So, super cheerful. Did I mention this is a super cheerful book? All right, well, a couple of years ago, I moved to California, so I was there for a couple of years. And in the 2 apartments we rented, one has burned down and the other had a giant earthquake wreck it. So I think that's a sign we made the right decision to come back. But I was so astounded by California, such an amazingly weird place. Everything looks like a cartoon character. Even though you're outside of Disney World, everything still looks cartoonish. So this is called The Robot Scientist Daughter Journeys West. She's a bit of an alien here, in the land of tanned legs and blonde hair, beaches and bongo drums, but she waves with delight at the seals sunning themselves on the rock. What a long journey, leaving skins and false limbs in her path, not in a covered wagon, but all the same, she reins it in. Once over the mountains, she could see the flower fields on all sides, the winding and happy light on bare shoulders. So what if the crispy trees were devoured every so often by fire, or the hills slid down in the rain, or if the earth rattled a little along the fault lines? In a land of cartoon mice, you learn not to question. Besides, she felt she was born to Imagineer. The books are so clean here, hardly touched at all, and the air smells like funnel cake. So I have an affection for California, but it is a bizarre place. So this next poem was inspired by an episode of MST3K about killer shrews, and also by the movie Blade Runner and some other movies where the robot, the daughter turns out to be a robot, or there's something she's helping the people escape robots. Anyway, so it's sort of a repeated trope, especially in 50s movies. So this is called The Robot Scientist Daughter in Films. The robot scientist's daughter is always beautiful in films in a neat blonde updo and 50s style dress. She helps the hero escape, She leads him off the island or planet. She gives him the code to shut down the robots before they take over the world. The robot scientist's daughter carefully holds on to secrets about her father at the dinner table. She's demure, but she knows her way around a gun rack or a test tube. She sneaks out to rescue prisoners after her father has a few drinks. The robot scientist's daughter must be there to humanize the robot scientist. He is both a protagonist we identify with and a villain we know must fall. If he had no daughter, the camera would have no way to enter the lab with sympathetic eyes. Sometimes the robot scientist's daughter pretends to be a robot herself, handing out food efficiently without smudging her makeup. Sometimes she turns out to be a robot all along, implanted with heartwarming but false memories. Sometimes she has a telepathic link to genetically engineered dinosaurs. When she was a child, she had only robots to play games with, mostly hide and seek and chess. This both helped and hurt her socialization. The robot scientist is named Morbius, but his daughter is named Susan. She will be the downfall, the island crumbling, scientists buried beneath rubble, killer shrews loosed upon the world. If you've never seen Killer Shrews, I really recommend it. All right, the next poem is called The Robot Scientist's Daughter Escape. This is a poem, I don't know if any of you guys know Lana Iris, but she really helped me with this poem when I first read it. She just loved it, and she was so excited about it, and I was like, oh, maybe I should keep writing these weird poems about robots. Anyway, so the robot scientist's daughter was an escape artist. She'd watched her father x-ray roses and peonies, knew the ins and outs of the genome. Each city collapsed under her gaze. Ice storms in the desert dropped among the bananas. The newspaper glared the news, but she was already gone. Sometimes she brought souvenirs, a cafe from Cuba plunked out in Sweden, a spun sugar swan on the seaside. No one understood the apparitions. She loved shadow puppets. Her hands became doves, cranes, foxes, but these were messages. Inside she itched to be set free. She ran in caves underground. She thought the green glow was the same, that somehow the crickets could communicate, the stalactites soothed her skin. On the tops of mountains she communed with planets, swinging the earth dangerously close to sunspots, knocking comets out of orbit. She thought when she sang, the seals could understand with their soft eyes and unwieldy bodies. She swam in the sea in black current and red tide. She sang, but no one heard. There was a rattling of undersea earthquakes. She might move the moon closer for company. So let's see, a couple poems, so you guys have a few more. All right, so this poem talks a little bit, it's only partially autobiographical, but talks about, how many times we might have died in our lives, and so I was thinking about that. So this is called The Robot Scientist's Daughter Brushes with Death. The robot scientist's daughter drowned when she was 3. Her brother was stung to death by wasps. She died in her sickbed of scarlet fever, and all her toys and books were burned. The robot scientist's daughter has become a specter. She haunts the children's hospital wards, plays ball with the children, and hangs their bright pictures on the wall. She's careful with their IV lines, with their thin, fragile skulls. The robot scientist's daughter spent all of college with pneumonia, coughing on her exam papers. She haunts the dorms, pulling fire alarms and shuffling the carefully stacked pages of the study groups. She died during a routine operation, bled to death on the table. The hospital lacked facilities for transfusions. She is a white-faced ghost in an ill-fitting gown, her feet still in pink slipper socks. The robot scientist's daughter is amazed she's made it this far. So many brushes with death. That German Shepherd attack in France when she jumped into a river, the skittering puddle jumper lurching over turbulent Kentucky air. If she is a ghost, she has no memory. She takes photographs to remember her home. Images dissolve around her. First, she's holding a television remote, a copy of Cosmo, her mother's textbooks, the curve of a boy's neck. The whisper of the afterlife is nothing but frost on a window. Her secrets will die locked inside her chest, her bones brittle fragments spelling out her mistakes. Find her among fossils. So the last 2 poems are for Fukushima. Fukushima just had its 4th anniversary on the 11th. So I got to read one of these on the radio to commemorate that. I was just speaking to some of my friends over in Japan, and they were saying how already they're really fighting to keep the memory of that alive, because the government is trying to suppress some of the films about it, documentaries and this kind of thing. So anyway, it was interesting. A morning of sunflowers for Fukushima. 200 1,000 sunflowers drink the cesium from the grounds of the temple, where they burn lanterns made from the names of the dead. This invisible snow, says the temple's monk, brings us along winter. A village woman mourns the loss of her blueberries. In Chernobyl, they grew amaranthus, field mustard, sunflowers, but how to dispose of poisoned flowers in spring? We build lanterns, we plant seeds, we set things alight. So later they found this experiment planting the sunflowers. It does draw cesium out of the soil, but unfortunately then you have the radioactive waste that is the flower. So I wrote this after they had officially announced that. And this is the last poem. Fukushima in fall. A field of sunflowers grow where rice should stand to draw cesium from the ground. The water lilies bloom after years of lying dormant. Something here about the resilience of earth, about renewal, something hopeful in the faces of those yellow sunflowers turning toward the last beams of light. Children hesitate before tasting plum jam, before sipping tea. How can they know what is offered? And everybody says, safe. Metal faces of new radiation detection signs appear next to the crumpled, worn idols of stone. Sunflowers planted in hope, in the names of the dead, fail to purify the earth, say scientists in September. Still, they are tended. They stand guard with origami cranes left on the beaches to be carried away with the tide. As winter approaches, more roofs carry the crushed bodies of cars as people try to repair and rebuild, children's thyroids tested and scanned. Strontium, cesium, iodine in the soil, in the fish, the fowl, the fruit, and the flowers burning in the field, aglow against the late setting sun. Thank you very much.